Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is Wednesday, February 5th, and we are continuing our testimony on H13, an act relating to Medicaid payment rates for home and community-based service providers. And this morning, we are going to hear from individuals associated with the designated agencies, and also a little bit later this morning with Adult Day services. So I have an order on my agenda. I'm not sure if that's the order that y'all are going in, but are you starting us off, Amy?
We're gonna start off with Lisa.
Lisa, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair and representatives, for speaking with me today.
Good morning. Because we have people who haven't been in committee before, we'll do a quick round of introductions. So you know who you're speaking with from people around the state. I'm Teresa Wood. I'm from Waterbury, and I also serve Bolton, Fuelscore, and Huntington.
Good morning, I'm Dan Noyes. I represent Woolgate, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere.
Hi, good morning. Howard McGuire, I represent Rutland City.
Brenda Steady, I represent East Milton, Westford.
Doug Bishop, represent Colchester's 1520 district.
Good morning, Todd Nielsen. I represent Brandon Carstown.
Hi, I'm Zon Eastis. I represent Guilford and Vernon.
I'm Jubilee McGill, and I represent Bridgeport, Middlebury, New Haven, and Weybridge.
Good morning, I'm Ray Garofano, and also represent Essex Junction.
Lori will go around.
I am Lori, Morse Committee Assistant.
Nicole Sergio, I'm the Director of Policy in the Department of Health.
Amy Johnson, from Your Partners.
That's site work, Washington County Mental Health Services.
Heidi Paul, CFO for Washington County.
Stephen Manili, CFO of Howard Center.
Mark Browder. Brooklyn City Councilor and member of the public.
And Kelsey, you want to introduce yourself up there as well?
Kelsey Stavseth. I'm the executive director at Northeast Kingdom Human Services, which is a designated agency that covers Caledonia, Orleans, and Essex counties.
Thank you. And we have a couple of the reps who have joined us.
I'm Rep. Desiree Cole of Hartford.
Donahue, you can just say who you are.
Ann Donahue, Northfield and Berlin. Sorry, the elevators are not on the rush around the building schedule.
Okay, we're just getting started. So the floor is all yours, and just introduce yourself for the record, and welcome to the House Human Services Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Lisa Stamatis. I'm from Milton, Vermont. I've never done this before, so it will take me 5 minutes to not shake. I do want to preface this with, I am not offended if anybody wants to ask me any questions about my family. Everything's on board, and I would love to stay to hear, but I'm going to have to skedaddle because I just want to explain to you what a typical morning would be. I am my family is serviced by CCS. We've had the wonderful opportunity. What CCS has done today with my particular daughter is somebody who lives in Georgia, a staff member, the advisor came and picked up my daughter to take her to work. To meet somebody, another staff member, an employment advisor, to work with my daughter. I'm going to go and pick up my daughter, so everybody does a little part, and that will enable, which I'm going to talk about having, monopolizing upon what the agencies are doing. I'm a penny pincher, so I really appreciate that the agencies have stepped up in CCS. I'm here to applaud them, what they've done. They've scheduled such, Marissa today, my daughter, so there's less downtime. They can service more folks, and everybody does a little bit of part, and they're in it with their hearts. They're dedicated. Would the supervisor be able to just drive past my house, report to work? Absolutely. But he thought, wow, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it easier. For that, do I appreciate it? Yes. So I'll have to leave because I have to pick up Marissa. And if I'm late for, also known as Diva, I will hear it. So I apologize. And if I offend anybody with what I'm about to say, please give me the opportunity to apologize and to become educated. Okay, now I'll start. My goal is to share how not receiving developmental disability services, I'll call them services, has impacted my adult children and our family's life. I'm here not only to speak about my family members, but also those in the community who are unable to speak. There are a lot. I'm the lucky one. I also think, yeah, I'll tell you. History, I'm the mother of 6 adult children, aged 35 to 41. Whoops, had to figure that one out. One has a traumatic brain injury and the other 5 have Down syndrome. With secondary complexities of early onset dementia, a generalized seizure disorder, deafness, nonverbal communication, ASL, and also a communication like an iPad, iPod, Proloquo, etc. OCD, an anxiety disorder, blindness, still drives a bike. I don't know how, but autism, Hirschsprung's disease, and so much beauty. Okay. Enough with the list. I don't see him as such. I just see him as wonderful human beings and my kids. Here. We don't qualify our love expectations of care for our adult children by their diagnosis labels and adjust a family like all of yours. Do you want me to? Okay. The good, the bad, and the in-between. And there's a lot of in-between, as we all know. I'll share our family situation without making it a sappy story, since I truly believe I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. Yes, my kids, they might not think. A typical day at our house includes toileting, personal care, and bathing assistance. At meals, 3 separate meals are prepared, 1 gluten-free for our son who has celiac, 1 for our son who has a restricted esophagus, and 1 meal for our son who has an eating disorder, tactile, oral challenges, whatever you want to call it. We sit at our son who has this restricted esophagus to monitor food motility, buildup and blockage, leading to choking. Last Thanksgiving, we had a wonderful event and we ended up in the ER. And then we ended up in surgery. Turkey's tough. We keep a metal bowl at the dinner table for regurgitation purposes. And this son has autism and OCD and will compulsively carry out actions and behaviors, even if it's detrimental to his safety. He's walked into traffic in downtown Burlington on South Winooski Avenue, and his support staff at that time had to physically grab him back, and he was fighting her. He was still walking, he was going. It was so bad that he was almost hit by a car, and I felt bad for the driver too. Of course, I wanted my son to be alive, but the support staff was so upset, she had to seek mental health assistance. Okay, and she didn't come back for a while. Our son with early onset dementia requires full care, eyes on assistance to keep him safe from danger and to process, understand, and comprehend the world surrounding him. A good sense of humor helps, but if all else fails, a box of Drake's cakes hidden in a glove compartment does wonders. And let me tell you, I restock regularly. We must be the eyes and ears of another son. Oh, okay. Who, this is them. Okay. Who impulsively acts without a sense of danger. Remind him to not use vacuum around water. I put that in because yesterday I was like typing and going, to look before he crosses the road, how to stay safe in a parking lot, teaching him how to interact and interpret actions of others, and how to engage in socially acceptable manner. Enough with the list. You get this situation. My husband and I are joyfully engaged 24/7 with our adult children and fall in love with them each and every day. We do need help and services, though. I'm mindful of that. Support services allow our adult children to receive training, skill building, education, insight, helpful strategies, and perspective from staff to become autonomous, independent adults. I have the same expectations. I'm a tough mom. I expect kids to have jobs. I want them to have their independence. I will stop. We too learn from staff and are grateful for the guidance and suggestions because I'm new at this. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a mom. I need help. I need guidance along the way. Support services enable us to be parents. Without staff and services, we fail our children because I'm unable, like I said, to be a psychologist, case manager, OT, PT, teacher, colleague, employment advisor, recreational team, communication provider, technology guru, and advisor. I rely upon these people. They're the most important people in our lives. We've been receiving research services from a designated agency since 1990 consistently, but recently transferred, as I said, to CCS. I was on a waiting list for 7 years, folks, 7 years. The DA, can I use the DA for designated? Okay, because I can't say that, okay. Deemed our family an intact unit with natural support since I worked days and my husband worked nights and weekends, so we'd always be there for our kids. As support staff and services evaporated down to one individual for my son with early onset dementia because he was in the high risk category, I was forced to resign from my position since I was unable to meet the requirements and travel of the job. I was supposed to go down to the Mexican border for 2 years. I couldn't do it. Okay, so they told me either stay or go. And I went. I don't regret it because this is my family. Thus, though, began the unraveling of my family. During this period, we realized our family would never reach the beginning of the DA's ever-growing line to receive support services because the staffing shortage was growing and the DA had no avenue to attract, retain employees due to inadequate and non-competitive salaries. We decided to transfer to CCS, a smaller, I'm going to use SSA. Is that okay?
Specialized Service Agency.
Thank you. Thank you.
And CCS for people in Champlain Community Services.
Oh, thank you. I apologize, Madam Chair. In the hopes that Vermont policies and actions would change, affording all agencies the funding necessary to attract, retain experienced, educated staff without adequate funding, DAs and SSAs will fail. Okay. Life without support services. On 3/18, I remember that day like everybody. Our DA furloughed TDS staff due to COVID, shut down. For the next 4 years, our family, except the one son I told you about, did not receive support services whatsoever. At times, I didn't even have a case manager. It was us. If minimal services were provided, it was for employment only. Okay. Most DA support staff didn't return to their jobs if the furlough and/or found employment that paid higher wages with much less responsibility. This is a sacred job, folks. Sorry. The staff that remained at the DA were assigned to consumers in crisis or who had critical needs, as it should have been. My kids had me and my husband. Crises have to be dealt with. There are other people who I'm here speaking that have no one. The situation left our families with no support services or at best greatly reduced services. It was a long 4 years without services. The first year was great. From March until winter, we got out there, we were playing tic-tac-toe, we were playing basketball, we were walking, we were doing great. That's something that I'll never be able to get back with my kids. It was a magical time. But then winter hit and reality started going in. During that time, one of my son's employer held his job open for 1 year, 1 whole year. Thank you very much. But had to terminate him after the DA couldn't reinstate the support staff. Another son lost my one son had 2 jobs. He lost one of his jobs. And my other children had their work shifts, which were on multiple days, reduced down to a 2-hour period, maybe one time a day, one time a week, if at all. Okay, I'll explain about the 4 years. My son with the early onset dementia has lost cognitive, physical, and emotional abilities, skills, and independence. I fault myself, mainly. I try with every piece of my being to save what skills and ability he has left, but I'm a poor replacement for the full-time staff that he once had. Okay? I pray for staff and services every night, and it's beyond sad to watch as I lose my son. He's only 41. My other son, who experiences panic attacks, OCD, and is blind due to keratoconus, but still drives a bike, don't know how. He tells me he can feel the sidewalk, and I'm thinking, feels a little stiff to me, but anyway. He wouldn't leave the house for 4 years because he was petrified that COVID, as soon as he walked out that door, he was gonna, this is the sign for pass, die. So no amount of encouragement could coax him out of for fear of leaving the house. We tried to keep our adult children engaged and active every day. I told you we walked 1.5 miles every day up that hill. We learned how to cook, doing schoolwork, books, playing basketball. But the first year after that, the novelty wore off. And my daughter said to me, would any of you want to give up your present life, Mom, to stay home with your parents without seeing any friends? This is my words, colleagues or community members? I had to answer because I know me. No, I don't even want to stay with myself. I'm boring. Okay. Eventually, our adult kids became bored, frustrated, and angry that they couldn't engage in life activities as they did before staff shortages. That's when our life started tearing apart. Our son became so distraught at losing his services, beloved staff, the one who has OCD and autism, and his job, his beloved job, that he would go and cash his check every Thursday like clockwork, take $15 out for short-term goals. He has long-term goals. He began sleeping all day and staying up at night. Most days he would not leave his bedroom until 2 or 3 p.m. He told me he had nothing left in his life. If anyone is thinking that we could impose natural consequences, punishment, or positive reinforcements for John to change sleeping patterns and behaviors, it's not doable with someone who has reinforced patterns, as I said, of OCD and autism. It's a little tricky. The trick is to establish positive events and a schedule, and he'll be there like clockwork. Loss of support services has devastated this son, and he's still up at night. My husband and I take 4-hour shifts when my husband comes home, and I do, and okay, that's not important. Okay, my daughter, also known as Diva, became sullen during the 4 years. Wow, okay. And wanted to know why she couldn't have her old life back, why she couldn't go to work like she used to. She would cry. She wanted to work. Why she couldn't go out anymore, and why we were doing this to her. She became very depressed and very angry. And of course, as everybody knows, it's always a parent's fault. So it's start yelling. During the 3rd year of not having support services, a case manager responded to my question from the DA when we would have staff and services reinstated by telling me, hey, you adopted them, you take care of them. I don't fault the case manager for their response. They were as stressed as we were, trying to fill ever increasing critical needs with staffing shortages and trying to find solutions in an untenable reality. They too were stressed. They were breaking. The cracks were there. The kids were angry, were losing abilities and skills, and I started feeling overwhelmed and paralyzed with the thought that they'd never have staff again. This was it. And there'd never be services again. I was failing the kids, became despondent, and I'm going to admit I became clinically depressed. I made it through this dark period by the unwavering love and support of my husband, kids, and great care from doctors. I'm the lucky one. I have medical insurance. Around the end of the fourth year of no support service, received a call from CCS asking if we're still interested in transferring to their agency. We jumped at the opportunity, couldn't even believe it, but still worry about the consumers we left behind at the DA who are not receiving support services. I'm here to speak up for them. I have guilt for leaving them. I'm happy to report that upon transferring to CCS, my daughter Diva, who was angry with me and the world, now enjoys 2 days of employment, peer activities, joined advocacy groups, and most importantly, has a sense of belonging and a friend. My son, who was homebound, who was afraid of going out, has worked with amazing staff at CCS and is venturing out of the house. Now he doesn't want to be home. No way. It's like, don't drive me there, drive me. And I'm saying, Dave, you live here. Come on, you gotta get out of the car. He's enjoying life again. And I wrote in with emphasis added, wow, the impactful power of support services. Bless their hearts. We're still working with my son on early onset dementia. He doesn't have any staff yet. And my son, who sleeps all day and stays up all night, but CCS staff is there for him and us, providing insight, strategies, and encouragement. They're being my quarterback, and I appreciate it. And most of all, a sense of caring. I feel like they're with us. The sense of caring gives us helpful encouragement as we continue our journey. It's by transferring there, it's put our pieces of our family back one stomata at a time. We still need staff and services. We aren't whole yet. I hope this committee will effect changes. I'm a outside of the box person, so I'm going to tell you that staffing shortages are a national problem. It's just not Vermont. It's not. It's all of us. To address staffing shortages, possible solutions, I called up Dale. Yeah, I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna talk to somebody and think outside of the box. I suggested the following: policies and wage increases that would attract and retain who employees or who are educated, qualified, committed, and interested in a long-term career in human services. Not the 6 months, I'll try this and turn over. That because when I was employed, told me that, hey, they used to call me by my last name, Stamatis, it cost us $80,000 for you to go through all my training. This is what I expect from you. So staff training and staff benefits and the turnover is costly. I don't want to see somebody, in one 7-month period, we've had 8 case managers. After a while, I didn't even put them in my cell phone because I couldn't even, okay, who are you? What lifetime is this? Affording agencies the resources and ability to do their jobs and hire staff. They know what they're doing. I gave you the example of CCS because sometimes I think that, and maybe, well, I'm not going to, that's not mine. Okay. Internships that provide loan forgiveness for a 2-year commitment of employment. These internships could be like the program offered to address the SRS staffing shortage in which participants were forgiven tuition, books, and peripheral costs for a 2-year employment commitment. Remember those? Well, Vermont already has tuition assistant funding programs in place, so the internship would only cost the state's books and peripheral costs. I'm thinking, just like everybody has a household, let's figure it out with what we have. Incentivizing and retaining employees to join, stay in human services field if they were able to become Vermont state employees. I know that's bad, but just as aides are in each school district, think about it. This action would attract and retain many employees to commit to a long-term career, and essentially those folks would perform the same duties as an aide, as a school aide. Okay, and that this, I will dovetail something at the bottom. Keep that in mind, okay? I requested Dale to define what constitutes support service to include whether they would allow agencies to creatively support consumers in different ways than is currently allowed. Whether Dale would allow agencies to provide services via the scheduled group activity with transportation to and from activities, whether Dale would allow agencies to purchase vehicles to carry out such services or allow me to fundraise, whether Dale would allow agencies to cover entrance fees to activities. Let's get that Muppet Mobile. Let's do it. Okay, I also suggested Dale consider allowing individual agencies to partner with each other, sharing resources, activities, employing staff at a consistent rate and benefit package. Okay? Agency compensation and benefit packages not consistent through Vermont, resulting in staff inability to move to and from an agency. My son from the DA's staff could not move over to CCS because she'd lose too much in wages and benefits and IRA. He's home. Please see the above. If agency employees and Vermont government employees, there would be consistency in pay, carryover benefits, time off, and career advancements. Plus, Dale could provide fiscal oversight and quality control of Vermont employees. Think about that, the enormity of it. Partnering with other nonprofit agencies such as Good News Garage to receive donated vehicles for agency and support staff use. How about that? Vehicles are expensive, and it's been estimated that support staff fleets a vehicle every 3 years. What 20-year-old can go through cars for $18 to $20 an hour? If cars were received from a nonprofit such as Good News Garage, opportunities would abound. Chittenden County alone has multiple colleges and universities in the area. Most students don't bring the vehicles to school. Having the use of an agency car would enable students to become employed in our community and may extend hours of support services to include weekends, nights, overnight, and other agency closing beyond the closing time. Okay, this is going to be something that when I said, please think about becoming Vermont employees and putting the funds into there. This group, I don't know how much you know about the conflict of interest. I'm going to just briefly speak and so you can understand where I'm thinking, oh, let's fiscally be responsible. Okay, because I'm a taxpayer. Everybody's asking you for money. I'm trying to appreciate that fact. Recently, Dale chose me to be an interview panelist for conflict-free case management bidders. Okay. I was beyond excited. I thought, oh my God, thinking I would be able to positively impact actions to address DDS staffing challenges. I now have grave concerns for the future of Vermont DDS services. In my humble opinion, what I felt is that this is going to dismantle the existing agencies and services, and it's a slippery slope to institutionalization under the guise of efficiency. The only problem is this will be millions and millions of dollars. It's going to be an added layer of bureaucracy, rebuilding the wheel. I'm just going to say it flat out. I hope you call me back because I have lots of opinions. If this committee or the governor, I've called up the governor and asked him, can I meet with him? Haven't heard from him. Can release me from the NDA, non-disclosure agreement that Dale required me to write and sign. I will gladly avail myself to this committee to share my experiences and my concerns. They're great. I also asked this committee to consider Governor Scott's message, which asked legislators to fix problems instead of continuing to fund them, to look for situations that will benefit Vermont in the long run and economically trickle down to Vermonters within our community, building a stronger state. That's why I want to come back and speak about why this conflict of interest case management is not going to do any of the such. Now is the time to work together to strengthen Vermont's DDS services models with actions of fiscal responsibility and a sense of caring for each other. Let's do it. Respectfully submitted, Lisa A. Models. Thank you.
You, Lisa, appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Okay.
open to taking questions from.
Oh, gosh, yes, nothing's off the table. Believe me, I live in a fishbowl and the kids take me to task.
Thank you. Go ahead, Representative Steady.
She has created a wonderful family, and those kids are independent. I think they're the best.
Oh, no.
I had to say it,
Bless your
every
heart.
one of them.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, anybody else have any questions? Thank you. Thank you for your comments, sharing your personal story, the impact of not having services and the hope of change, you know. You kind of brought us a full circle. So thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing your family's story with us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and representatives. You have a good day and get home safe. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Representative Black.
Thank you very much for sharing this. I hope that we could assist in this request because I would really love you to be able to come back and share your other thoughts
Oh,
behind this.
yes, it's, oh my, I have grave concerns and please, that's why I was trying to get from Dale and from the governor, I need to be released from the NDA because I had to sign it and make sure that I had even all of the paperwork deleted from my computer. Oh, ouch. I'm sorry, but this is going to impact not only services, this committee, all of Vermonters, but every taxpayer. It is immense. And I'm sorry, I'm taking up your time, but
No, but as you mentioned, the only way change can be articulated and done is through transparency.
yes,
That's the only way change can be done, through transparency. Truth hurts, but the truth is what it is. So we need to hear it. We need to know it. That way the changes and the protocols, procedures, or language changes can be put into place. That way we are effectively serving Vermonters. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, because right now the contracts are being discussed. And I actually had a paragraph asking if this committee could contact the governor and Dale and stop this before Vermont gets into any legal situation of contracts signing that could be sued, because this needs to come out. I'm a type of person that I paid my water bill, $399.20. I know down to dollars and cents and what it costs. I'm here. I'm not asking for pie in the sky. I want, pink this or pink that. Guys, we need to work together within the system of what we have. I don't want a recreation of what the agencies are doing. And I think sometimes, I can't speak to all agencies, but I can speak to CCS. Darn it, 3 different people. So they have a good handle on it. If you're going to look at somebody, look at smaller agencies that know how to save money, keep money, and sorry for any, some designated agencies too. But ask them what they're doing to save money, to service as many people as they can. Because I've got examples, really good examples. And sometimes I hear like, oh, this costs a lot of money. This one's wasteful of this. Let me come back and talk to you about waste, because you guys are going to be.
So I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sorry.
No, that's fine. I think there's folks who don't necessarily disagree with you, but we also are a federal requirement to do this. So we stand to lose actually all of our home and community-based service money if we don't do this. But how it gets implemented is a whole other story. So we have to do it. So we don't have a choice about doing it. But how it gets done is, I think, still something that we should be able to have some impact on.
I truly appreciate that, Madam Chairman, Chairwoman. Sorry.
I answered anything.
Thank you. I did go on Dale's website and I do understand that this federal requirement that we've had a decade worth of waivers was informally asked and informal no was given. We never asked formally to the federal government and we never submitted a formal request for a waiver. Maybe we could have gotten it. Let's ask, number one. Number two, there is a waiver to the Medicaid with, I read about the, about using services for people who are unhoused. Let's creatively think about this. So I think that there is a little bit of wiggle room. What I'm concerned about is time is of the essence. This needs to come out and be discussed and addressed for everything that it is or isn't. I don't know that I want to get that involved in paying. I'll keep my opinion to myself. I apologize. But there are ways around, or to work within. Everybody has a set budget at home. We do too. Let's look at it. Okay, let's talk about it. I hope you can get me a phone call from the governor. I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Amy, it looks like you are geared up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Gloria. Morning, Beth.
I am pinch hitting for Delana Norton. I love coming here and talking about our field. Very passionate about it, but I'm Gloria Quinn. I was here several weeks ago.
And I'm Beth Seitler. I'm the CEO of Washington County Mental Health Services. And I think I also want to say, just for a little cred, that I was the director at Champlain Community Services. Got to work with Lisa and her incredible family. Washington County is a designated agency here. Sure. You guys, you had a kind of introduction to DAs, SSAs, kind of
Yes.
general.
Amy did that for us a little while ago.
Yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to say I'm the executive director of Upper Valley Services, designated agency for Orange County. We also are a specialized service agency for Washington County.
So you guys hear about money all day long, I'm sure. And I think Lisa did a really good job of explaining some of the pressures and some of the staffing issues that we're encountering. And I think I'm here to talk about how difficult it is to get staff. So I'm going to continue talking about what you hear about, but hopefully with more specificity and details that helps you to kind of understand what it's like. I've worked in developmental services for over 30 years. I started working in my studio with a man with autism. He came and worked with me, and I was a direct service worker, and I was a crisis worker. I managed a group home. And yes, the cautionary tale is if you stick around, they make you the director. That's what happened to me. Anyway, so I've been around a long time. I've worked in the system for a long time. It's an incredible place to spend your life and your career, especially because you get to work with people like Lisa and her family. Diva, her daughter, is ridiculous. She's absolutely incredible. So much fun, like many of the 4,000 people in services with us. So we have we've dealt with underfunding for many, many years. Unfortunately, the way that we get funding is we come to you and we ask, we advocate. I can't remember the last time that the governor of the state has put an increase into a budget for us. A 0% increase, as our CFOs will tell you, is a cut because everything else goes up, and you're all familiar with that term. Okay. So we every year we come in and we do a lot of math and we try to come up with a number that we think makes sense for how we're going to be able to keep our staff. We have worked in under a reimbursement system. I think people probably talk to you about system reform that's starting out. One of the, or it's finishing, hopefully, one of the biggest issues is that rates don't align with costs in each category. For instance, case management, this is an example that has worked for me pretty well to think about. A case manager costs about $80 an hour and we're reimbursed, I think, 55, something like that. So we are already in the hole every time we're working with a case manager. This is part of what system reform is trying to, or attempting to make sense out of. There are inherent problems in the payment system. I'm going to let Gloria talk about that a little bit when we get to her slide. But suffice to say that there's a lot that's not counted, and there's conversations about we'd like to be able to demonstrate what you do. We'd like to, can't you just count the services? Which seems pretty straightforward, right? I mean, of course, we'd like to just be able to count them. The problem is there are a lot of things that aren't counted in the system. Overtime, contracts with TLC, which is a outside provider, which is at least twice as expensive. But as a designated agency, or even as a specialized service agency, when you have someone in residential services, you need to provide that service for them. You don't have an option about whether or not you get a staff there that night. So you have to make sure that you bring somebody in to do it. And that means paying for what it costs. And that also means not getting reimbursed for what it costs and not being able to demonstrate that kind of difference in your encounter data. People are going into crisis. And when you have crisis, sometimes you're adding additional staff. Service coordinators are working overtime. The other thing that's, I think, important for you to know is that paperwork isn't a reimbursable cost. We have staff who have responsibilities to make sure that they're encountering everything they do, but they also aren't organizations aren't paid to pay them to do that. I've heard from the state that it's not just pay, and you need to think beyond pay. That's not a surprise to any of us. We all understand how important it is to keep a workforce these days. Everybody, and like I said, everybody who's coming in here and talking to you is talking about how hard it is to get people to come in the door. We know the tricks. We know how important it is to make sure that the people who work with us feel valued. We know how loan repayment and tuition reimbursement and making sure that we're celebrating our staff and doing exit interviews and finding out what it is that brings them into this work, how we keep them interested, how we keep them safe, how we keep them engaged, how we keep them well trained. All of those things are part of what we do every day. So when I hear you all need to be more creative, sometimes it makes me feel like my head's going to explode, because that's like we're doing everything we possibly can to keep staff who we know want to work in the skilled. In our exit interviews, we hear that people have enjoyed the work.
In fact, you hear you need to be more creative from I just don't want to make assumptions.
I've heard that from state workers that right, that it's not just pay, that you need to be more creative, and I understand the pressure that the state has, and there's not a state money tree, but I think that there also needs to be an understanding and a respect for how much we put into maintaining our employees and keeping them engaged and keeping them. And what we hear on exit interviews is it's pay. People want and need to be able to pay for heat. They need to pay for housing. They need to pay for their car and electricity. And we need to have reliable reimbursement to them. Additional pressures that we encounter, recruitment costs, trying to get people in, retention bonuses. But again, people are saying just because they want to have, they want to be paid, a fair amount. We, over the 30 years I've worked in the system, the acuity of people, the complexity of people. I don't know did you talk about complexity data or the crisis continuum, or a little bit? Okay. So one of the things that we looked at a couple of years ago is what is it, aside from people having developmental disabilities, what co-occurring complexities do people have? So what is it? Is it being unhoused? Is it substance use disorder, mental health. It's something like, I think 60% of people in services have a co-occurring mental health disorder, which is, makes things very difficult. I think it's a third of people in services have a history of abuse. That for me is actually very low. From my experience, when I look at the people who I've worked with one-on-one, it's much higher than that. And we have a system now that is crisis-based. People come in based on need, based on a critical need, and we have to make sure that we have the staff who are available to kind of meet them at what that need is.
I was just gonna also say that we had talked last time about the shared living provider model. And that model is also strained and people are aging. Shared living providers are also aging as is our population. And so with the higher acuity people who have very high level need, it is a typical occurrence that a shared living provider can no longer have the person stay with them due to stress, due to many things. They can't find staff as well. It falls apart. Now we are staffing round the clock, sometimes double staffing. And we currently go to equity with the proposal to receive the funds to provide those services. Oftentimes, those services are not paid for at the rate that we have to pay. And additionally, you had indicated we're paying higher rates for wages for people who are doing very, very complex, difficult jobs. We are having to contract with TLC, which is an outside agency, at a much, much higher rates, and we're not given those rates. So these are just examples of how the pressures stress what funding comes in and the agencies. And when Delana and I were here last time speaking, we talked about we all wear many hats. We're all jumping in. And right now, crisis is a common occurrence. We have built more crisis spaces and they're completely 100% utilized. So this is a very strange system. And I know we're not here to talk about the system reform that is coming our way, but I would also like to come back and speak about some of that at some point down the road, because I think the pressures are great and the design needs to meet what services are actually needed for people and the models that we have available.
Just one last thing is, I had somebody say to me recently that agencies are incentivized not to deliver services, that the way that our funding works. And I want to speak to that because it's an incredible statement to me to hear that and to think that there's any provider in the state who would underdeliver services in order to get money. It's an appalling thing to consider. And I don't know a person who I've ever worked with who would not deliver services so that we could have some sort of a gain. The problem is that we can't deliver services to everybody because we have to triage people who are in critical need. In even when, I was working at a smaller agency and all the nice things that Lisa had to say, there are people who are not able to get every service who needs to, because with a bundled rate, with limited funding, with limited staffing, we just can't do everything that we're obligated and, more importantly, wanting to deliver. Where service providers kind of, joke is like, it's in the name. This is what we want to do. We want to deliver services to everybody. But if we have to over-deliver services to somebody else, we can't do it all. And if we can't keep staff, we can't even do as much of it as we need to. People are in pretty critical conditions.
I have a question here, Representative Garofano.
Thank you. Can you share a little bit about the gap between what the reimbursement rate is and what you are paying when you're contracting externally? I'm just curious, like a range, like is it a $2 an hour? Is it a $5, $20?
I want to defer to Heidi.
Hi, I'm Heidi Hall, City of Washington. We actually can address a little bit of that in some of our later slides, but specifically the salaries, I think it really depends on which position you're talking about. So it can vary anywhere, certainly in our clinical level, our more professional level, the gap in the market is pretty substantial, and we're talking $10,000 to $20,000. So those are pretty big. In the lower range, I would say there's a range maybe around $4 to $5. Yeah, per hour, except per hour. So it really depends on what position you're talking about.
Thank
But we do have a slide here kind of talk about how we got there.
Great, thank you.
There's so many things to speak about. I just want to make a couple comments. One is that the difference between the SSA and the DA is that the DEA is mandated to serve everyone within their, you probably remember this, we talked about this. The SSA can say no. And in fact, in most other states, if the funding is not adequate for the person who they are expected to provide services for, if they cannot keep the person safe, they will say no. And that is leverage in order to get the appropriate funding for someone to keep them in. But in this system, we are encouraged, the system is designed to be able to, with permissions and with authorization, to be able to flex resources because they are inadequate to serve everyone at the level that they need. And there are wait lists, long wait lists in most other states. The state, for anyone who is authorized to receive services within the system of care, there, in my view, there is no wait list, or it is a very short wait list. So that's different. We're taking all the resources and we are utilizing them to serve absolute everyone in the community. That's another difference. Most other states do not serve absolutely everyone with some of the level of complexities that we do within the community. And I think that makes us strong. And I think that makes Vermont great. In fact, that's why I'm here, working in Vermont. But it is also important that when we are comparing ourselves as a state and utilizing our resources to other states, that that's kept in mind, because it's not apples to apples. It is not the same. So those are really important pieces.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
You said something a moment ago about, if I'm understanding it correctly, when the service needs of one individual increase, that can impact the service delivery for another individual. Is that correct?
Potentially. Sure.
And is that a result of staff resources or dollars available?
I would say staff resources.
Staff resources.
And it's both because,
Right.
sorry,
But
it's both.
I would
agree,
think,
right,
I would
yeah.
think so, but most significantly, what you were referencing was the need to draw staff resources to the more acute
Right.
individual.
The
Okay.
short-term problem is staff resources. The long-term problem is being able to recruit to have enough staff so you wouldn't have that.
Sure.
The problem.
So I have a question, and maybe this is maybe more appropriate for Dale. So if it is, then just tell me that. So I'm understanding that sort of one of the elements of this payment reform that's happening is looking at the percent of service plan hours fulfilled. And I'm starting to get emails from constituents about their service plan being cut in half. And I'm just looking to see whether, and we're gonna have the department in, by the way, committee members, hopefully they're gonna be able, that's our oversight and accountability session next week on Tuesday. On payment reform and conflict-free case management. I'm just, one, is that true? Is that sort of part of the calculation? And obviously by reducing the number of authorized services down to what you're actually able to provide, that increases the percentage, which obviously has an impact on what's being paid.
The model is set up for an 80% reduction in services. And this is something that another state that I came from did exactly the same.
80% reduction?
And you could probably say, like,
It's hard to get it into context. The 80% factor that's being thrown out there is just the cash flow projection on delivered services. So they're estimating of the allowable services that only 80% will be actually delivered for just the normal things of life,
Right.
vacancy, sickness, those kind of things. So that is the predicator on how they're anticipating the cash flow as well. It's at 80% of food services. Yeah.
I'm wondering if what you're hearing about is reassessment with the CIS.
And that,
Well, and so I asked this family, I said, has there been a new needs assessment? They haven't gotten back to me yet, but.
So I can speak to it a little bit. So the current model, and the model's not complete, so just to get some context, the model currently that we have in draft represents 45% of our current service budget is not even accounted for in the current model. So it's not complete by any means. But what the SIS will do will give 6 levels. And if you look at the current modeling, many people would have reduced services in order to spread and make transparent and to create equity within the system. Right now, for thousands of people, we have individual budgets that is in context with the person's services, their plan, where they live, who they live with. It's very individualized. They will end up having 6 levels based on the model with a set number of services that are designed into those 6 levels. And for many people, it will be reduced. Now, there are flexibilities that are expected within the budget that people can move things around within their own service plan. So that is an expectation, but we've done some preliminary analysis with over 200 people that we serve, and there's a huge number of people who will end up having reduced services budgets, and there are also a large number who would have increases, supposedly. So I'm not sure what would happen to all those people with reductions. And unless we have the flexibility built into this new modeling, then we will have a high number of people. I had indicated that there are already 46 people that we serve who are above the threshold of the shared living provider stipend, for instance. These are very complex, these are people with high complex needs. Now, if, for instance, that shared living provider says, this is too difficult, I'm not getting the resources I need, and that folds, we're going to be paying 3-4 times as much to now wrap around someone with staffing supports in housing that we don't have available in this state and with staff that are not available. So I'm really concerned that this is not being designed in a way that reflects the current needs of this state, the people who live in this state, and what resources we have available. It's really important. So it is not complete. It doesn't speak to, and it's not just the UBS budget, it's many agency budgets. There's a huge portion of the funds that go to services that aren't even accounted for in the current model. So the time frame that we're under is hugely aggressive, and in my view, dangerous. And I've said it to everybody. I say exactly the same thing to everybody. I think it is a dangerous lack of design that is not in context with Vermont. That is my opinion. That's my professional opinion. I've lived in this design before from another state, and I'm not seeing it match with the way people need it here. Not that it couldn't be designed well, but it is not currently designed or complete in its design. So I'll say that. And I am happy to come back and talk about this anytime and in any level of detail.
And yes, you should ask Dale.
Yeah, please. Oh, I did want to say one thing about the utilization. One of the things that we had meant to say. Encounter data and utilization is measured differently for every single agency. There are 3 different, I think just 3, but there are at least 3 different EMRs, electronic medical records systems. These were also unfunded mandates. Agencies needed to pay for this and all of the staff within the main. So it's just another example. There are many unfunded mandates that agencies need to use the resources, limited resources for. So it is hard to track it across the system. Right now, if you asked our agency to come in and talk about utilization, I would say we can prove how we're over-serving a huge number of people. One example is service coordination. We're at 60% what can be encountered within the goal, but we track all of it because we think all of it, we know it's really critical to the services that people receive. We're at over 130% utilization for that role. So we could go through this if you want to, and to really understand it, and where did the resources go and why did the resources go to all these places? We could do that. But across the system, you cannot do it, because we can give general reasons. We see and we track within the agencies who we're serving and why we're serving and why we're having difficulties with some of those services. But the systems are not the same. And so we can't track it that easily. So it's much more complex is the answer.
So statewide turnover and vacancy rates, you can, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the slide a little bit. I don't want to go through and read it all to you, but of 6,000 positions, we're at almost 13% vacancy. Turnover has been sort of astonishing. And this is what our experience is, but it depends on what program. I mean, to have this in aggregate, it's significant, but then we have one program at Washington County. It's a residential program. We have, I think there's 14 staff in it. 3 are Washington County staff. No, it's not 8 staff. 3 are Washington County staff. 5 are TLC contracted staff. This is one of our most complicated people. Somebody who I'm afraid you may see in the news soon, who's has behaviors that need a lot of support, has to have people who are very well trained to support him. He's not safe being on his own. He's 2-on-1 staff, and TLC staff are just not able to support him the way they should. We don't have a choice. We can't, you would think like we've thought of all the things. The service coordinator is covering, the staff who know him well are working as much overtime as they can. We're training the TLC staff as well as they can, but they're just not able to do it. And it's I had someone come to me a couple of days ago saying that one of our staff had asked if he could park in our one of our parking lots overnight because he doesn't have a home, because he wants to sleep in a parking lot. And this is not, this is the first time I've heard this. I mean, this is, the kind of critical condition that our staff are in. They want to be working with us. They want to stay. They just can't. They can't stay and they can't live. So I'm sorry, back to vacancy turnover. It depends on what the program is across the organization. I think we're at 14% or something for vacancy right now. I was looking at it. We have 100 open positions, 700 staff. I won't go through and say all of this because I think we've hit on it pretty well. It's expensive.
Yeah, when you're talking about mentoring and training with the turnover that's happening on a regular basis, and this again, that is an unfunded mandate and necessity. But we are constantly retraining. And so it takes a long time for people to really work very, very well with people who have a lot of complexities. And for everybody, it's a very individualized thing. And so when you're constantly retraining, people never get to that level. And so it's going to escalate the crisis as well for many people. Okay.
This is where you help right here. The gray line is what the investment has been. And you can see the effect on turnover and vacancy data over the years. 2020, there's a little bit of stability. There was, staff were sticking around for a little bit. If we had the staff with us, we couldn't recruit, but if staff were with us, they generally stayed with us. And then as there were increases, obviously the most significant one back in 22, the 8% increase really helped with vacancy and turnover. Sometimes I've heard, we keep investing in you and nothing ever changes. It really does change. It really makes a difference.
Can I?
So go ahead, Amy.
Amy Johnson, Vermont Care Partners. I think we hear a couple of things, and we've been hearing in the building as we're doing the ups and downs, that there isn't one universal thing that agencies are struggling with kind of consistently across the board. And if there is, it's wage. We talked about this, and I just want to hammer into that. Being able to afford your basic needs to survive makes a difference. People do need a livable wage to be able to live here. The other thing is we see shifts in our turnover and vacancy, and the question gets asked of us, well, why isn't it better? Or why are people not coming off wait lists? Or why do we still have people not getting the services that they need? You are investing in us and we appreciate that. And when we come to the table, what we need versus what we get, there is a gap. And so that aggressive, robust investment hasn't been able to happen. And the CFOs will be able to talk to this, but that's why there is a gap between what we need and what we're getting. And because of that gap, we are not going to see a turn in the curve the way that we want to. And I think that's just important to note that it does make a difference, and we will see a bigger difference as we see bigger investments. And when I come back in to talk about our budget ask, I'll bring some additional details around ways that we're trying to be creative, do shared services, shared CFOs, ways that we're trying to be really innovative and have cost savings. But that investment there's a gap in what we need versus what we're getting.
Go ahead, please.
Can I add to that a little bit? This is
Go
Kelsey.
ahead, Kelsey.
I'm the executive director at Northeast Kingdom Human Services. And so, one, I do want to, just to emphasize the point that Beth and Gloria and Amy have made, like the legislature has been generous over the last couple of years, and it has made a difference. I'll speak specifically for NKHS, but I've been here for a little over 3 years. When we started, we were at 445 employees, and now we're at almost 530. And the investment, and after it started, we do a culture and climate survey every single year to survey staff and saying, what's happening. And we get a various feedback, which is great in helping with culture and how do we support folks and create career pathways. But the number one thing that we always hear from staff, so we ask 2 questions, one's an inverse, like, what would be the number one thing we could do to improve you recommending people to work here? And then what's the number one reason you'd leave your job? It's always pay. I think we've come a ways, and you can see that in the data here. It has made a difference, but in order to really turn the curve, as Amy said, it is pay. And I think going back to talking about TLC, sometimes those rates are much higher than we pay our staff, which, is frustrating the staff for saying, why is this person, making tens of dollars more an hour than I am, and I'm training them. And so there are these unintended consequences that come from the underinvestment, as we have to figure it out because we're a zero. There's no wait list. The other point that I wanted to make as we're trying to recruit folks and that also be accountable and transparent is saying that, like, there is a little bit of a investment issue, saying what we're being required to do from an admin and paperwork requires investment in admin staff, which has nothing to do with providing direct services. And so we also overvalue those by saying we need data analysts and data scientists and people who know how to run EMRs. And now we need technology to give to direct service folks so that they can input their information and make sure to account for everything they're doing and doing it accurately so that we can draw down the funds and saying, that is great. We are accountable for taxpayer dollars, and we take that really seriously, but investments are needed in order for us to be accurately accountable. And so that's the thing that kind of is that tangential investment that's necessary to keep up. And so again, as we invest, we've got to improve our technology and ability to report out, but that is a secondary to the direct service positions that we're doing. And then one thing that I think gets lost as we advocate, and I don't want to, is saying that, like, the services that we do provide are great. And I really do want to tout Vermont's values in the work that we do, that the home and community-based effort compared to the national average, we provide far more services in the home and community base. We don't have large residential programs, and we really pride ourselves on that, and that we are doing some of the hardest, most acute work to get people out of prisons through Act 248 and get people out of hospitals and make sure they get back to their families and in the community where, we believe that all folks should have the right to do. So having robust investment so we can increase wages to that livable rate for direct service providers, which is really what we want to emphasize on, is to hire people, but also keep them, because the importance of the therapeutic relationship in the long-term care is directly correlated to how long people stay. And it really is about investing in people and providing pathways for growth, but also increase wages year over year. And it's really hard to count on the fact that, like, we aren't guaranteed increases every year. So I think someone mentioned this before. Gloria said, look, if we don't get an increase, it's a cut. Last year for NKHS, our healthcare insurance costs went up $1.5 million. Without an increase, we would have to find that revenue elsewhere. We covered 2,000 square miles in the kingdom. We clocked over 2 million miles last year at 70 cents a mile. Like, that becomes expensive in rural places. So there are costs associated with just continuing on, and then to recruit and retain, we need that more robust investment. So I just want to highlight a few of those things. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelsey. Rep Noyes had a question. Second.
If you just go back to that slide where you see, yes, thank you, the turnover rate, how does that compare nationally? Because those are obviously Vermont numbers, but also Kelsey just gave me another question that's kind of connects that. The turnover rate, how much is admin versus how much are people providing direct services?
I don't know how it compares nationally.
Okay.
I haven't heard, I'm not sure if, we can look into it. How about
Yeah, we can
do one of those? We'll get back.
I'm just wondering if we're like in line, it's totally fine. I'm just, 23% turnover rate per year.
It depends on the state. I have a feeling, and again, I think we'll do the research and bring it back. I think there are a lot of states that it would be much higher, and there are states who've invested in, like I wondered about New York and some of the New England states. I think it would probably be comparable to lower.
My experience is that it's the frontline folks that turn over the most.
Right.
And the home providers, residential support, and admin staff tend to stay in place.
If you were to, I wonder what that would look like if you were to break that out in terms of the, people providing direct services, what's their turnover rate, what's the vacancy rate there versus the admin?
Yeah.
It's higher, for sure. It's higher.
And we do break that out internally, where we break it out by mental health, admin, across the designated agency, and DS has the highest turnover rate every quarter that we track it, and annually. So DS has the highest turnover rate, and that's just for NKHS.
And just a quick follow-up, that last bullet point, administrative burden, does that apply to the work you're doing? Twice as much time on electronic documentation than providing services?
Everybody, because it's the frontline person now as well.
Right, which is unpaid for the frontline. We need to wrap up a little.
Yeah,
bit.
I was gonna say, we got other people coming, and I want to make sure your other witnesses have a chance. Yeah, no, that's
I
fine.
would like to just say, since this was brought up earlier, the new case management entity, that whole system, we've been asking a lot of questions and I haven't heard the answers yet. Where's the money coming from? It is millions and millions and millions. And so of course, I will say that I'm concerned that the money is going to come from services. So hopefully we will not see that from the program.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Well, glad you were able to be here.
This is a very exciting bill, and I'm actually pretty excited to be able to testify on it because I think it's super important. So we're going to share a little bit of information on just kind of the financial state of the designated agency systems and really how historical funding and what this bill could mean in helping us to address that. Is the down thing over? Okay, all righty, there we go. So as you know, and this was, you guys brought this up last week, you did a lot of work on this already. And I'm glad to see that it's being addressed again and maybe have a little bit more teeth. But again, I think there was a lot of work put into this. I think we're starting from a pretty good spot. Yeah, just wanted to address that.
Yeah, I mean, I think our exact comments are that the Agency of Human Services hasn't been doing that.
And I would agree. Each year we're like, but.
I know.
Right. Yeah. So I appreciate.
They are wondering why we want this bill.
So what you see here, so this is going back to 2008, some assumptions to just put in here before we really get into the data. As you can see, we're comparing the CPI is our, the furthest left column here. And then you have the DMH Dale appropriation percentage increase. Then if you go to the second column to the right, you have the DSU increase per year. And then you have the two variance columns to CPI. All of this is predicated on us being fully funded in 2008, which we would argue we weren't fully funded in 2008. But you can see the widening gap in funding since 2008.
We have a question. Go ahead. Rebecca.
Yeah, just in terms of those two, because I was looking at these before, what is the difference and the DSU, the inflation, the appropriation from DMH Dale, is that what the legislature gave or they recommended? And what does that mean, the inflationary appropriation DSU, which doesn't match, obviously?
That's what we've been given every year as rate increases.
So right, that column that says the appropriation is what was passed by the
Yep.
legislature. Those are the increases. So 2008, we had a 4%. And as recently as last year, we had 3%. And you can see we're comparing that to the New England CPI. And so you can see the variance from that. So what this tells you is just in DMH and Dale alone, between 2008 and 2025, the gap between inflation and our appropriation increased by 13%. This is just to kind of acclimate you with that, with the spreadsheet.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is, say, randomly choosing FY17,
Yes.
the bill that the legislature passed with the appropriation was a 2% increase.
Yes.
And,
Over CPI of 1.5 that year.
but what you actually received was 0.2.
No, from DMH and Dale, we received 2% on our Medicaid, which is not 100% of our revenue, which we'll get into in the payer mix. So it doesn't equate to an actual 2% revenue growth. It equates to a 2% revenue growth upon those Medicaid streams, which is a large percentage of our revenue, but not 100%. And then from the Department of Substance Use that year.
Oh, okay, that's what I was trying to.
Yeah, two
Thank you.
separate, yeah. So as you can say, DSU has really fallen behind. They typically
Department of
don't,
Substance Use, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
then the health
Division.
department. Just in that time, the gap has gone over 25% because they typically don't put in, recommend or put in any
And
increases.
so this gets to what Kelsey was saying, like, yes, if you look at 23, there was a large appropriation, 8% does help, but it doesn't get us caught up. It doesn't get us caught up to even where we were funded in 2008.
Well, I guess I'm curious because on a previous slide, you showed 5% in FY24 under jail, DMH, and I think it was 5%.
Did we?
Yeah.
Could be mistaken in there.
You go back to your chart, your graph.
23 was fine.
Well, they don't have 5% anyway.
Yeah, I see it.
So it must just be an error. More forward. There.
It was 853.
8.8, it says, yeah.
Right, and it says 833 here.
Yeah, we can double check that
Yeah.
figure.
Double check the figures. I don't know which one is correct.
Yes, that might have been a typo on that one. We'll go back and.
That's right, one of them is incorrect. I don't know which one, but one of them is incorrect.
Someone-
It looks like a
someone dragged
drag in here.
Because the
Might have
CPI
happened.
is the same too. I
Yeah.
doubt the CPI is the same in 24. I think the CPI.
I think it was a 5%, not,
Okay.
just relying on my memory,
Yeah.
it's not a good thing to do.
Thank you for catching that.
Yeah.
Any other questions about this before we move on?
No, I mean, and we do have some other witnesses at 10:30, so we'll make sure that we get through your.
And we don't have that many. Okay.
So here, this is kind of led into this, our payer mix. So just wanted you to see how our payer mix differs. Like we understand that, Medicaid pays for a lot more than just us, but we are within this system fairly, I don't know if I would say unique, but fairly unique in our payer mix that we are 90% reliant upon Medicaid. So our revenue streams are very reliant upon these rate increases. We don't have the ability to cost shift to commercial insurance or private pay or anything else really. We do our best, we really do go out and do our best to impact that 7% there and try to bring in as much revenue as we can, but we are very reliant upon these rate increases.
Yeah, and we specifically added this draft just in response to testimony from last Wednesday that, we do understand we are one of many worthy human services agencies out there. And, that if we're supporting one area at the detriment of the other, we are very different. And we're different by design, right? So Teresa knows the history of how we came to be, and we are primarily Medicaid funded. So we don't really have anywhere else to go for cost shifting.
And one thing I'd add to this is saying we bring up the other folks, hospitals, FQHCs, corrections, the state, like they all depend on us. And I think the expertise you get with DAs and SSAs is like well earned, and that we do pride ourselves on, and we're frequently getting calls from the hospitals or from law enforcement or from the state and saying people are in the wrong place and they need to be in the community and we need you to do it. And we hire nursing staff to do complex medical procedures. Like we are alleviating burdens on other places and saying, you know, an investment in us is also supporting other community organizations that would struggle under the weight of some of the work that we do.
And when you're not able to do it, we also hear about that.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, the developmental services, mental health, substance use system, community-based system is definitely integral to, you know, keeping the balance out there.
So, and this slide, I just wanted to point out, like, when we are level funded, and I did hear this morning that there was no recommendation from the administration for any increases, that I took out the things that are controllable. Salaries, we can give nothing. Contracts, we can tell the SLPs nothing. These other things happen regardless. These are what we call uncontrollable increases. So you have your health, your other fringe, your liability insurance, and some of your other operating. Those things are going to go up with CPI or other rates, regardless. So those are the rate increases that we have gotten quotes from, either quotes from our health brokerage or whatever. So we know that in order to make a level funded budget, which is what's being proposed, this is a cut. We would have to cut this much in order to be able to stay exactly even with our salary. So that's really very important, that a level funded budget is not a level funded budget.
So this is our days in cash. Just put this in here compared to the hospital system. So we are the small blue bars. You can see we did have a bump in COVID. There was a lot of cash came into the system. Some of those COVID funds, those have basically come down. We are back as a system average of 63. I also point out that is not the floor. It's a system average for all the DAs and SSAs. You know, we are closer into the 20s at the Howard Center on average, and that's not our floor. Sometimes you go below that. So, you know, the state wants us at 90, right? As you can see, the hospitals are at 122, and they seem pretty level around there. So just put this in here just to show that there is a lot of fragility here.
Right. Do you want to speak to some of the causes why the cash might be going down versus the appropriations?
Yeah, I mean, we have to pay. You know, we had, as Heidi pointed out, we have increases. Our health insurance has increased 100% in the last 4 years. You know, and we haven't had the increases on our revenue side to make that up. So it's coming out of our cash reserves. You know, as we've had to increase staff to try to recruit. We're doing our best to recruit, trying to pull money from everywhere we possibly can to give it to our staff, get people in the door, and it's eating up our cash position. I should say also, when we look at here, we have some deferred capital needs that aren't currently being addressed. I know we do, Howard Center, I'm sure the system does, because we don't have the cash to really put into our capital, our physical plant, because we need it for staff.
Which really gets us to our bottom line, and this is our last slide. So this bill is a lot more about just the, ensuring the inflationary increases each year. That's predictable. Like right now, we are starting our budget bill now. We're in that right now for 26. And for us not to know if we have any increase until June, July is really very difficult. It's difficult for staff. They want to know if they can stay, are they going to be able to meet their increases? That's really important. Adequate rate, the base rate. So we've been talking a lot about rate setting and how that's looking at all the different initiatives that AHS might have. It's not one or the other, right? It needs to, rate setting will adjust our base cost, and then the ongoing inflationary increases is critical. And that's really, I think, what the old bill had tried to get at. And I just don't want it to get kind of deflected that, oh, we'll do all these rate study things. Really, they can happen hand in hand, and the rate study things don't happen as quickly, but the inflationary thing is something that we can implement immediately.
Both are very critical. I would also say that in looking at the rate studies, it's important to us that the rate studies happen universally. That we don't, if we're gonna, like, we are in favor of rate studies of going to cost-based reimbursement, with the CPI inflationary increase. We are 100% in favor of this bill. We just need to make sure that it's universally implemented.
And the piece that we don't want to also miss on cost base is so right now I can tell you, hey, we're paying $20 an hour and that's my cost. That is my cost currently. That is not the cost for actually being able to recruit and retain staff. So that is a factor that needs to be also addressed within that base rate setting is what does it take to actually get folks in the door?
The same, again, I would put in a plug for our capital needs as well, our physical assets. Eventually we'll need updating. And so if we are only going with current costs, if we're never building anything in order for us to build those reserves back up, in order to maintain our physical assets, eventually we'll get in a place where we don't have cash to do so. And then I don't know what we do.
Well, I think it's interesting, we look at the days on hand of cash and, it's been in the news a lot in the last few months about how fragile the hospital system is. And most of them have double what the designated agencies
Yeah,
have.
but I was just thinking.
So, it's, go ahead.
That seems really high for days cash on hand for hospitals. Could have been before they took it back. They prepaid for COVID.
So we actually do have that broken out by hospital. And I think on an average, just like the DA one is an average, some down at 20, we have some at 100. So I think you're going to find exactly that at the hospitals, that you have some that are quite a bit lower.
Some are lower. That's not their floor either,
Yeah.
that's their average.
Yeah, no, I got that.
And if that's average, it's still seems high. Sorry.
And the last thing that I would add about the predictability and support of payment too is that, we are a safety net, and, it's when we talk about being in crisis, it's okay until it's not, and it flips. It's not this kind of nice transition to we can't do this anymore. And we've had this happen with other providers where one did fold a few years ago, and there's a desperate, what are we going to do with all these folks? And the state comes to us and saying, can you take them? Can you take them? Can you take them? And it's panic. And so there is an element here saying there's no slow transition out of the crisis. It's we are the last stop before you get to your emergent care, which is not community based. And so, investment in this is also investment in maintaining and supporting the community based services to make sure that higher levels of care, which are also more expensive, aren't necessary, and to prevent that from happening.
One of the things that you talked about several people talked about it, and that's the use of contracted staff like TLC and other places, I'm sure as well. And nursing facilities have the ability to seek extraordinary financial relief, like if they had, which many of them did, extraordinary costs related to traveling nurses and LNAs and all of that kind of stuff. Do you have that same capacity within the designated and specialized service agencies?
Not specifically, no.
All right, any other questions? Are you at the end? Yeah. And I just want to make note of your last comment on the previous, which is H13 supports the federal access rule, which we learned some about yesterday, interestingly enough, from Green Mountain Self Advocates, not from the state. But anybody help? Any other questions? Thank you all for being here and sharing. And I think we have an understanding of the importance of supporting our community-based providers. And I'm just speaking for myself. I want to support our existing provider system before we start adding and doing other things. And we have not had a real mechanism to do that. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for everyone.
Yes. Oh, okay. So, your witnesses are here.